All right, so I'm going to take you through the steps to do your homework assignment tonight, at least the first part here of all the graphs. This way, if anybody's confused, we can hopefully get unconfused here. So let's start with the first graph. The first function is f of x equals 2 sine of x. The 2 is the amplitude. So what that's going to tell us that we're doing is we're going to go up to the value of 2 as a maximum and down to a value of -2 as a minimum. The actual sequence of the graph is going to stay the same. So if you look at the dotted curve that I provided for you, that would have an amplitude of 1. So the sine curve is still going to start here at 0, 0. But at this maximum, it's going to be up at 2. At pi, or 180 degrees, it's going to be back at 0. And you kind of just go through and follow the pattern of the provided sine curve. Just instead of going up to 1 and down to -1, we're going to go up to 2 and down to -2. So now we could connect our points. And we can see that this blue curve winds up being f of x. So we can use this same technique to graph g of x. Now notice g of x has an amplitude of 8, but there's a negative in front of the 8. So that negative is just going to reflect your curve. So instead of going up to +8 first, we're going to go down to -8 first. It's still a sine curve, so it's still going to start at 0, 0. You'll notice all of these are sine curves that are all going to start at that same location. We're going to go down to -8, back to 0, and then at 270, instead of being at the minimum, we're now going to be at the maximum value. And we could continue that pattern on for the rest of this curve as well. So this is just really stretched out and really reflected over the midline. Notice both of these first two graphs have a midline of 0 because there's nothing added to the sine. The graph for C has a midline. So as soon as I see that midline, I want to make a line for the midline. So at 3, I'm going to go across at 3. So that's halfway between 2 and 4. So I'm going to make just a little faint dotted line here, approximately like where 3 is. Now that midline is going to act like the x-axis for this graph. Notice h of x has an amplitude of 1. So we're going to start at the intersection of the midline and the y-axis. We're going to go up 1. We're going to go down 1. And keep following that same pattern. Now, anytime that we would have been at an x-intercept, we're now going to be at an intercept of the midline. We're still going to have minimums and maximums here. It just they're affected by the shift or translation up. So this would be h of x. Oops, and I forgot to label g of x, so let me go back and do that. It's extremely important when graphing multiple things here that we want to go through and definitely show all of the things labeled. Now if you look at D, D has a midline of -5, so I'm going to go down here to -5, make my little dotted line, so I kind of know where I'm going back and forth towards. Again, an amplitude of 1, so I'm just going to go up 1, back down to the midline, down 1, back up to midline, up 1, back down to the midline, and so forth. So if we go through, connect our points, we'll actually see that the curve here of h of x and the curve of k of x are identical in size. They're just in a different location. And the last one here, we have to put it all together. So, well, those are ugly colors, let's see. Light blue. So for E, we not only have an amplitude here of 3, but we also have a midline. So midline is 2. So I'll draw that dotted line in there. And we're going to still start at where the midline intersects the y-axis, but this time we're going to go up 2. So I'm going to go up 2, back to the midline. Then I'm going to go down 2, back up to the midline, up 2 again, back to the midline, and then down 2. You'll notice the pattern still stays the same. There's really no difference in the pattern of the sine curve. It's one nice thing about these trig curves. Again, just like the last couple, make sure we label, and that's what your homework assignment should look like. The second part of the homework assignment had you go through and find the range of each one of these. So if you were to go through and actually show the range each time, you're just looking at what's the minimum versus what's the maximum. Okay, I'm not going to do all of them with you, but I will do one of them with you. So let's look at g of x. So if you take the range for g of x, if you look at the green graph, the lowest value on the green graph is at -8. The highest value is at +8. So the range for g of x is going to start at -8 inclusive, so it's going to be a bracket, not a parenthesis. And it's going to go up to +8, again, a bracket, not a parenthesis, because 8 is actually on the graph. Hopefully this helps.